Welcome to day 4 of the Year of the Man Summit 2022. If you don't know me, my name is Elise Micheals, and I'm a men's mental health coach. And for the last 2 years, I have been helping men find purpose and passion by healing subconscious trauma. And if you're here, you already know that I created this summit as a way for men to have access to mental health tools, resources, and coaches that they normally wouldn't feel comfortable with because of the adversity that they face in the mental health world. So we have 7 days, 7 speakers. Today is day 4. Who've all come together to put this together for free. The entire summit is free. The recordings are available for 24 hours. But if you want to have access to the creators, ask Jahmaal some questions after his session, ask any of the rest of the creators after this session, have access to these recordings for the rest of your life. Please remember to purchase VIP. It's only $97. Saley will drop it in the chat for you. And, you get to talk to us for the next, however many days we have left. I think 3 or 4 days left. So it's insane. It's been great. The summit is specifically created to help men become just better fathers, leaders, spouses, and men. There's no other summit like it, and we're so excited to have you here. So that being said, we would like to welcome Jahmaal Marshall to the stage. Jahmaal is actually a certified counselor, former program coordinator, lover of poetry, music of all genres, and has a never-ending hunger to see past the surface of different topics to see the why behind the what. So today he's going to be talking about the empathic man, and we're really excited to hear it. So over to you, Jahmaal, and thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Thanks, Elise, and thanks for having me. Thank you for that introduction. And I'm going to be talking about the empathic man, but I also want to talk about the road that got there and the road that gets there for each of us. And I know there's some females here in the house. And so if you have a husband, if you have a son, if you have a nephew, if you have a cousin, this applies because you can take this and you can share this with them. A lot of times in today's day and age, you hear a lot about toxic masculinity. You hear so many things in society that goes against what it means to be in touch with your feelings, to be in touch with your sensitivity, to be in touch with the feelings of other people, and why that's a bad thing. But I do want to share with you, at least for 15 to 20 minutes, a bit of a narrative of like what got me to where I am and what made me me. And not just the highs, but also the lows. Anybody here who knows me personally knows I don't give you just the highs. I don't hide behind a white picket fence. I get into it. And so for those who know me, just type get into it in the chat, because that is what I do. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to get into it. And it's going to be pretty raw, but I just want you to stay with me. So a lot of times I may pause and just say, stay with me, because you may not even like, oh, why did he say it like that? What's good? Or, oh, I don't know if I would have chosen that form of words, but we didn't come here to play games. This is 2022. So let's go. So I'm going to give you some short testimony here and just tell you my story before we give some actionable items of how we can walk this out in a manner that's redemptive. So as a child, I grew up in a home that I would describe split right down the middle. I had one parent that was absolutely divine as a toddler, and I had one that abused drugs and alcohol, and that was my father. And he did that well into my early 20s. My mom, she did her best to ensure that we were raised in a house where we loved the God that she loved. She put us in parochial school, and so we regularly attended church as a family. I was able to learn at a young age exactly how to go through the motions. So I knew how to speak the Christianese. I knew how to become what people wanted me to become to gain acceptance, maybe without even knowing it. I knew how to quote scriptures. I knew how to parrot, all those things that we typically do in faith-based circles. So if that makes sense to you, just drop a 1 in the chat real quick. So I'm initially from Los Angeles, California. So South Cal in the house. If y'all here, holla back. And when I was 5, I'm dating myself, we moved here to Washington, D.C. in 1989. In the early years, we lived in a very rough neighborhood. And so it wasn't cool to be a Christian. It wasn't cool to be those things. And so I had completely 2 different personalities at home than I did with my friends. Growing up, I learned how to emulate Christians, but also I learned as a little boy what people wanted. So I deceived myself into believing that I had some reality of God, but it was non-existent in my life. I also realized that I could be 2 different people throughout my everyday life. And it was just funny how I chose that so early on, and those habits became ingrained. Soon I realized I was cheating myself. Oh, well, I didn't realize, but I began to cheat myself. When we came here to DC some years later, we went to a church called a Calvary Chapel, if anybody's ever heard of that. And it was a huge emphasis on uh, truth and on like, what does the Bible say? And so I found it a safe place because it was a little different from church I was used to. You know, I did go to a predominantly Pentecostal Black church where they take the tambourine out and where the choir is almost as talented as Kanye's choir. So early on, that was what we went to when we came to DC. And then we went to a Calvary Chapel, which was very different. But I was hearing like, oh, that's like what it means like in the Bible. And I understand everyone under the sound of my voice may not be a person of faith, but I'm just going to share my story of all the parts of it. So there's a catch-22 to that. When you hear based on your moral code what truth is and you don't respond to it, you began to develop what is called hearing without action. So I didn't realize it early on. I was getting myself used to inaction and indecision. And it wasn't like a religious thing. It wasn't like this is what you have to do. It's just like these are some good principles to live by. But I was just so used to just, that's good to hear. It's good to know. So I thought that by the age of 12 that I had a salvation experience. And I thought that things in me from a Christian standpoint started to gain momentum. But honestly, when I got home, none of that stuff translated. And by the time I was a teenager, my father and I began to grow farther apart. With his abuse of drugs and alcohol, I began to resent him because I didn't have him at home as the father and the leader that I needed him to be. And also, he abused not only drugs and alcohol, but also heroin and crack cocaine. So there were times where, not for whole days he would be missing, but for long hours he would be missing. And more, I began to grow in fear of him. I began to grow disconnected. It wasn't like when I was little, but I would say like around the time when I was 9, I was just like, I don't know who this person is. And so coming in the house, I didn't know what he would be like. I had no idea what condition, like if his eyes were glassed over, if he was going to be in a rage, if he was going to be mean, if he didn't feel like being bothered. And, I don't want to, this is some of this my story, but if anybody can relate, just drop a 3 in the chat to just that type of uneasiness when you're coming past your own threshold. And don't feel any pressure, but okay. I see Tiff is keeping it 100. It's all good. It's all good. This is a safe place. Oh my goodness, Jackie Curl is in the house. My sis. Okay, yeah. Bill says only when I was married. Okay, yeah. All right, let's go. So growing up in this fear of him, every day became unpredictable. And because every day was unpredictable, a fear of rejection began to take a root in me. And it took a very deep root in me. It was weird because that fear will be the branch of all the rest of the unhealthy cycles in my life. Obviously, with that being his lifestyle, my youngest sister, my mother, and I became like a triad. And I found myself becoming like my mother's surrogate spouse. She would lean on me and depend on me for things, and talk to me about things. I think that's all she may have. I mean, she's amazing, strong, phenomenal woman, but she knew I was going to be there for her no matter what. And so, there was times when I had to be the man of the house so early on. That was already the design of that like sensitivity to know how to listen, to know how to listen for problems, to try to seek to find a solution, even though my little young mind couldn't process that. Is this making sense to you guys? If it does, just drop like a 2 in the chat if what I'm saying is making sense, because I want to make sure I'm not going too fast. Okay, I see we follow. Cool, let's go. And so I'll be honest, I was a bad little boy. I was, but I had a sensitive side to me. And to be real with y'all, I had a way of being present to someone in their pain, and I actually cared about their pain. But it was wild because, growing up in the inner city in DC, I wanted to stuff that side of me. I didn't want people to see that side of me. I knew how to throw on face and bow up, and act real tough just because it's like that wasn't cool. And I know where this is a very mixed audience, but in the inner city and in my community, especially at that time in like early 90s, that definitely wasn't cool to be a sensitive guy, and to be there for someone and to listen and to care. It was like the popular thing was to be a jerk. And so I got a tenor of what everyone else wanted me to be like and sound like. I heard as a young boy that I knew how to imitate like anybody. Like any accent you give me, I can pretty much imitate it, like any accent almost. I'm surprised I haven't gone into like being one of those voiceover cartoon people and like just monetizing the heck out of it. But also, I saw the bad side of that is that anytime I got around somebody, I felt like, what do they want me to say? And how do they want me to sound? And I was living in straight up survival mode. Does that make sense to folks? If that does, I want everybody to drop a one in the chat. Not everybody, but just those who have been in those places where they've lived in survival mode. And when they get around somebody, they just don't feel very comfortable. Okay. Man, Maria's here. Wow. Wow, this is all right. Yeah. Okay. Let's get real. So I yearned so bad to escape my home life that I would stay out of the house and I would stay over a friend's house. Sometimes I would come home and the bathroom would be locked and my dad would be in there getting high and shooting up. And so sometimes I had to go over people's houses just to pee and just to use the bathroom. This is going to be a little raw tonight. It was also during this time around the age of 13 and 14 that I began to drink and smoke. And it was also around the age of 14 with a group of friends that I saw my first pornographic movie, which ignited a hunger in me that would control me for the next 10 years. I began to see this as an escape from the horrors that I lived at home, and a sense of shame began to come over me from the things that I was engaging in. The drinking and the smoking and the pornography for me was just, I didn't realize how much pain I was in, because as a 14-year-old, I'm not really processing these things. I know there's pain at home, and I know I have to find a coping mechanism to numb with it. It was also during this time in my family that we stopped regularly going to church. And so most Sundays I worked, I was a lifeguard, and the block is hot at the pool on Sundays. So I just go and work and make money. So I long since forgotten about the truths that were offered to me as a young teen. And it was also during this time I began to party and to go out. Oddly enough, there was a part of me that knew something was wrong and with the way I was numbing the pain, but I believe that it helped me to drown out what my home life was like. I would never abuse heavy drugs, because one thing about abusing heavy drugs is that I was like, I don't know if it's in the genes, y'all, but I saw what it did to my dad and I was like, I don't want that smoke. So I stayed away from any like LSD, crack, heroin, shrooms, anything like that. Something told me like, don't ever touch that stuff. But I was touching other things. And I didn't really see that I was developing a whole addictive persona that would turn into a myriad of vices to escape my mental turmoil. Does that make sense to anyone here? And I know, we want this to be a safe space. I don't want people to really like, I'm not asking anybody to jump out there. Tonight I'm here to spill the tea on my stuff. But I think a lot of times people think of addiction in a sense of something that is not socially acceptable. And you're going to hear more and more about my addictions to just achievement, my addiction to acceptance, my addiction to being everything to everybody. Even these were addictions because it was numbing the pain that I was in. Okay. I see. This is making sense. I was fascinated with entertainment, with images of nude women, and I saw it would develop like a deep, and with the R-rated movies and magazines, it would develop just a deep sense of shame. And I didn't realize that when I started violating my moral compass, that when you do that, your slide down is progressive by nature. So it was around this time that I became sexually active. Being in high school, I was a knucklehead. I did what knuckleheads do. And I was so deceived. I also, one girl I was dating, I started like taking her to church. I went back to church and I started taking her to church with me. We would go from the hotel to the church and I would actually preach to her about wrong things she was doing in her life stuff I was doing with her. We would drink together and do God knows what. It doesn't bear mentioning. But during this time, it's like either she was numbing the pain or the other addictions I had was numbing the pain. And I also want to go back to say that in school, I made straight A's. I had an injury from being on the wrestling team in 10th grade. And so I couldn't play sports to the level that I used to. And so what I lacked in athletic activity, I more than made up in scholastics. If there was going to be an A, I was going to make it. No one was going to outsmart me and outwit me. I just needed something to hold on to so that I felt good about me. Is that making sense to anybody here? Just drop like a 5 in the chat if that makes sense to you, or if you've been there. Oh, okay. We're getting all the way real tonight. Let's get into it. Let's go, folks. All right, y'all making me feel safe to just keep sharing. So, the weird thing is that while I head into college, I began to get tired of like living a double life. It was pleasurable to be doing these things, but I began to just get worn down. And I can't tell everybody how to live their life because I know different people in the sound of my voice believe different things, but this was the moral compass that I had. And I was constantly violating it, but also there was pain inside of me that I wasn't addressing. All the empty relationships, all the partying, the drinking, it was just like, it wasn't fulfilling me. It was making me temporarily happy. The two are very, very different. God was pursuing me. Again, it was weird and helped me to develop convictions and a moral compass that I didn't have before. I started reading the Bible on my own. So it's, instead of riding the coattails of my mother's faith all those years, as a 17, 18-year-old, I said, well, let me just read the Bible on my own. But I started pulling away from all the outward stuff. I stopped dating. I stopped going to hotels. I stopped smoking. I stopped drinking. And I didn't realize that even though these things look good on the surface, I didn't see that I was developing my own self-righteousness. Jahmaal was saving himself. I was like, I can save myself from all these things. I can actually make all these things right. And I was back, y'all hearing the popos in the background. I was back to being in the position, where again, I was developing yet another addiction. It was an addiction to religion. And I don't know if anybody's been there before. Okay, I see y'all want y'all's 5 minutes of fame. This is what life's like in DC, but we keeping it all the way real tonight. Whether you're an atheist, an agnostic, or whatever thing you may lay claim to, I had an addiction to religion. And I know, like, because I'm a podcaster, so when you put your podcast down, you have to list different things. And I'm mental health, entrepreneurship, but also talk about faith, but I have to put religion. I just don't like that word because I was addicted to keeping rules and setting up all these safeguards so I could feel good about me. Does that make sense? Drop a 1 if that makes sense to anyone I'm talking to. If that was what you were doing in the life you were living, no matter what you believe. Oh, let's go. Let's go. Jerry's in the house. Yeah, y'all go back and listen to Jerry's for real. Get that VIP for sure. Oh, I see Elise. Elise is keeping it real. Yes, yes. Brad is okay. Yep, former religious addict checking in. Oh, it's savior syndrome. Yep, we're gonna talk about that for sure. There we go. Faith does not equal. And Maria, you better preach, girl. Yes, ma'am. All right. So I'll keep going. And one thing I did, since I'd appear to have it all together on the surface, I said, okay, I'm not doing any of these outward things. I'm not doing any of these wrong things. But I was so addicted to not only saving myself, but I was also addicted to achieving. I started working at DOJ around this time, and I got an outstanding on every performance appraisal. I worked on the director's floor of the whole United States Federal Bureau of Prisons. And this is not one office. This is the central office, the director's floor. And I'm the only intern and the only Black kid. So I had something to prove. And I transferred to intern to a step worker. And so I had a government job. So I was doing the dang thing. I was addicted to making myself acceptable in the eyes of everybody. And then I said, okay, I'm still a dude. I still have feelings. I still, so I said, well, I'll just start looking at pornography again. And I went back into that. I said, well, I'm not in bed with anybody, so surely this can't be that harmful. I had no idea that I was searing my conscience through this habitual exposure to these images. I was eating junk. I was overachieving. It's extremely dangerous to exchange one vice for another because it only increases self-deceit. I wanted to actually put up a PowerPoint, but tonight we just going raw. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever heard of the law of diminishing returns. Most of you people who are professionals should know that because that's a huge thing in business. We always talk about that because that's how we make our money and make sure that we're investing the right way. Okay, pretty much 50% of the people here have heard of that law of diminishing returns. Awesome. So the definition is the law can be categorized in 3 different stages: increasing returns, diminishing returns, and negative returns. And the law of diminishing returns is a useful concept in production theory. And so I kept doing these things. And at first, there was a return. At first, there was a dopamine rush. At first, there was a rush of norepinephrine. It's like, man, I felt pretty good. And then that feeling began to diminish. And then it began to get negative. I eventually came clean to the elders at the church I've been attending, and I got accountability, but also got set down from ministry. I didn't mention that I was serving in like 5 different ministries. And this wasn't 5 different ministries because I love to do this. It's because I wanted to feel good about me. I wanted to say, look what I did. There's that empathic man again. Look at how many people I care for. I'm going into the prisons. I'm going to the homeless folks on the street. I'm writing for the church paper. I'm doing this with these young adults. I'm serving on audio visual. And if anybody's ever served on audio visual, anything, I don't care if it's church or nothing, it is murder. You are so nervous because it's like, I just don't want to push the wrong button. I was worn out. And at first I was upset when I was set down, but it was actually a relief because it's just like, I didn't realize I needed a break. I didn't know how to rest. Oh my goodness, Lee. I love that she said ego masturbation. She's keeping it too real. My ego was off the chain. And you'll hear about it a little bit later as I share. I just wanted someone to say that they were proud of me because I never heard those words from my dad. I had heard those words. I mean, my mom's actually divine, but I never heard those words from my father. And so I was always overachieving and feeding myself with all these plates I had spinning just to feel like, man, we made it, but I was killing myself. So I started going to an accountability group in Northern Virginia. And I know with the topic we're talking about and the counseling that myself and a lot of other coaches do, I want to make sure you guys stay with me so this doesn't land the wrong way. The group was rooted in healing memories from the past and focusing on the crimes that have been perpetrated on me in my childhood. I was told things like, you have a father wound or you have a mother wound. Not that there isn't merit for that, but hearing rhetoric like this at a young age and with where I was rushing through the process. I did not really care to hear these things because I just wanted to, whatever I was doing and the addictions that I had, I just wanted to be free of them. I wanted that kind of microwave just healing right away. And my mind was in such turmoil. I was just like, I don't really know how to process this. So for me, the way I took it was, it just reinforced to me that I wasn't responsible for my choices. And it made it easy for me to pass the buck on to my parents. I was constantly keeping my focus on what they didn't do and how they could have done a better job raising me and why didn't they do better? So hear me out. As long as I was the victim, my acting out was only a result of the crimes that had been perpetrated on me as a young boy. Does that make sense to anybody? Drop a 1 in the chat. Or a young girl. I know we got some ladies in the house tonight.
Jahmaal, I just wanted to emphasize that because that really spoke to me. And especially because me and you had done the podcast. And if anybody got that email, we listened to it. And exactly what we talked about was the father wound. So it's funny that you brought that up, that you're like, people told me I had this. And then I was just trying to get the popcorn version of my healing and so many people look for that, right? But my therapist even told me the other day, she's like, there's a first degree and a second degree of change. The first degree is initial behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm on this diet, I'm changing it because I see things are bad. And then the second degree is the internal. I'm changing this because I want to feel better. I'm changing this because I deserve more, right? And the first degree happens fast, is that popcorn change. And the second degree, like you're talking about, it takes a long time. And you have to get through the first part first. You have to get through the hard stuff first before you can get to that. So I love that you're bringing that up and taking on personal responsibility. Is like, you can look back and see those things as the root cause, but you are responsible today, here and now, for how you move forward and what you do with that. Because they damaged or damage, that was too powerful of a word. Whatever happened,
Mhm.
but it only happened during that time. It only happened once. And whatever is persisting, you know, you're doing, right? You're
That's it.
carrying out.
That's it.
At once you might have been a victim, but if you continue to bring that into the future, you're victimizing yourself. So I just wanted to emphasize that for you because it was so good. And I just wanted to, now I'll check out again. Continue on.
Powerful, sis. Love it. Love it. And I love the way Elise came in, and I love what Spade is saying. Energy flows where attention goes. Um, my attention wasn't really on the healing. My attention was on getting better, which goes back to that addiction. I don't really care to do the hard work to heal. I just want to get better so I can just, again, get back to stroking my ego and just say, I've gotten over this. I've done this. I've conquered this. Because if I conquer this, someone's going to be proud of me. Someone's going to love me. Someone's going to accept me finally. And maybe I'll just accept myself at some point. It was a checklist. I love that, Elise. I love that. Who else has had that checklist that they want to check off? Even those who may have done therapy in the past or decided to get some help or did a diet plan. Let's go there. Who's done that checklist? Drop a one in the chat. Let's hear from the people before I continue. Oh, we in good company tonight. Hello to the people. Look at that. Okay. Okay, we feel safe. Secret safe with me. Awesome. Okay, let's go. So in the process of doing this, I learned a lot. I learned a lot in going through this group in Northern Virginia. But I don't know if you've heard the term. And tonight I'm hoping that you guys, because I don't have slides to present, I hope that even while you're keeping up with the chat tonight, y'all gonna lose some calories. I want you also to take a notepad and take some notes because we're gonna really, really get into it. There's a quote that says, "The same sun that melts the wax hardens the clay." Again, the same sun that melts the wax hardens the clay. So the sun that can melt the wax that helps me learn and smoothly heal can also harden the very inside parts of me and cause me, because I know it, I think I'm doing it. You ever told someone you was going to the gym for like 3 weeks and you ain't even darkened the door, you ain't even been to the parking lot of that thing? You know, you just think that you've been there. Again, hearing all that stuff, all that amazing stuff, it didn't land because I wasn't, not that I wasn't ready for it, I didn't want it because my ego wasn't ready. So not turning away, from the patterns that were eating me alive and learning. I heard a minister say once, addiction is progressive by nature. So in layman's terms, you never finish where you start. I began to go to adult bookstores to look up ads and papers to anonymously hook up with people. And I always had an inhibition about being with someone who was a complete stranger. I think that's because I had my career at Department of Justice. And it was just like, one, like the shame of like, what if something like that got out? And that's a complete stranger. And also the cases that we were dealing with, people were losing their lives. So I was just like, you know what? That's a little too crunchy. Jahmaal, I'm not going there. However, in the early part of 2008, I got involved with a woman who was 10 years my senior. Now, y'all, I'm in my mid, late 30s now. At that time, I was like 22, 23. I was a young adult. And it was just wild because I began to notice a pattern. A year later, the same thing happened. And they both had children. And I don't know what it was, where I had this thing for like women who were older than me and that had kids, or they looked at me as like, okay, he's got a sensitive soul, he can be a dad to my kids. Or it might have been something in me that I wanted to be the father to someone else that I never had for myself. I'm not really even sure. It could have been all three at play in one time. It was just weird. But what I start seeing, and for me, from a faith-based standpoint, God was never enough. Wasn't enough. I was always looking for something and someone to fill the void. And shortly after these relationships broke off, I began to go habitually back to overachieving, back to scholastics, back to being the best at this, back to my addiction to pornography. And I noticed I never felt accepted. At the root, I just wanted someone to take an interest in me. I just wanted someone who would love me and who would accept me for who I was, but also who I wasn't. That's just what I wanted at the root of it. All these things had nothing to do with so much the external addiction. but my mindset behind the addiction, all the stuff I had myself involved in, all the ways I was running myself through the mud, I just wanted to be loved and to actually believe it. If that resonates with anyone, drop a 4 in the chat. And if this is a safe place, so I don't want to put anybody on blast. Okay. Oh wow, say Lee, Mr. Green, Tiffany, Darren Bell says amen. Brad says Brad's got a 4. His comments are going really fast. Spade says, I believe it. That was deep. Okay. All right, we'll keep it moving. So I found myself around this time also opening up about vices, but I wasn't turning away from them. And in the summer of 2009, I was severely depressed. I'd exposed myself to so much junk, and I wore myself out through so much activity that I began to put my life in danger. And I also, just the stuff I was seeing caused me to question myself, question who I was as a young man, question my manhood. I know because I worked for the Department of Justice, I knew I never did anything illegal, anything like that. It was just like, there's only so far I can go. But it's like when you see those images and when you've been involved with different people, it leaves a stain with you. And you can reap, but you can never control how you're going to sow. Going back to that law of diminishing returns. And so as a result, in 2009, I became very suicidal. I was very depressed and I began to abuse prescription drugs. So I would take pills to go to sleep, and I would take stuff to just wake myself up, to gin myself up, because I was in college and I had a full-time job and I was involved in so many different things. So my life was a mess, but outwardly, oh man, outwardly, I look like a superstar. I remember people talking to my mom, like, your son is just so amazing. He's such a model son. I knew how to have the image where no one would know. No one would ever know. I could deceive anyone. And part of a fear of rejection is you know exactly how to deceive. You know how to sell. Long before I was even in sales, I knew how to sell. It's crazy. If you knew how to sell, I want you to drop a 1 in the chat. Okay. I see we have some salesmen. Okay. I see folks are getting honest. Mr. Green dropped like 10 ones. Oh, man. Oh, Lisa's getting real as always. Career in it. I hear you. Let's go. Oh, man. Green Cardone. You got me cracking up, Elise. I can't even look at your comments because you had me dying laughing.
Sorry.
So, did you want to come in? Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. So as a result of being really suicidal and just my mental health being at an all-time low, I knew something radical had to happen. I couldn't get any sleep, and my life was getting out of hand. I felt like a car going down the hill that didn't have any brakes. And the strange thing about addiction and numb pain and overachieving is that when you open the door, you are no longer in control. You are very much controlled by the habit, but more importantly, controlled by the mindset that fuels the habit. Drop a 1 in the chat if you've lost control. And I'm not talking about like an addiction to some immoral habit, but I'm talking about even food, even your mental health, even the way that you work, even taking care of your own health and wellness. Okay. Are we getting real tonight? Okay. I love this. Freaking love it. So we're going to switch around a little bit, talk about some other things. If you listen to the podcast in the interest of time, it's only so much I can cover tonight. So I would encourage someone to listen to that episode because I talk a lot about my dad. But while this was happening, my father, who I had grown to resent and hate, he was slowly changing. James Robert Marshall, it was a miracle happening to him. So this is 3 years after 2006. In a drunken tirade, we were on the floor in the hallway. And that night he gave his life to Christ. And I know there are different people who may or may not believe, but for him, that changed his life. And it was so weird. I know what I'm going to say may or may not land well, but he was slowly changing. God was changing his life. He walked away from drugs, alcohol, negative influences. He separated himself from all the people he used to run with. And his marriage to my mother was the way it hadn't been for years. Seemingly, while he was soaring, I was sinking in quicksand. During this time, I started to resent his success and what he was becoming because I was still processing so much and I felt like a failure. So it was weird as his life was changing. Mine was falling apart. And then I began again to think like, okay, because of the things that you perpetrated on me and the things I've been through, this is why I'm like this. And so it was, I loved him, and our relationship had really changed like dramatically from what it was when I was little. But I still had this resentment and this bitterness and this rage deep down inside. And this was for my own father. Can anyone relate to that? I want you to drop a 3 down in the comment section. Just stay, hang with me tonight, folks. Okay. Brian, Lisa's like, yes, Troy, Bill. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's how it was. So I knew something had to change. And my position at the Department of Justice, it had timed out. I'd actually worked myself out of my position. And so for the first time in 11 years, I was without a job. That's when I decided to go away to Middle America to seek some very intense counseling. I thought they were going to focus on my habits, but my counselor actually zeroed in on my rage, my anger, my resentment, my unforgiveness, and most importantly, my not believing that I was accepted. There's a song by this girl group called Barlow Girl, and I can't remember the exact lyrics, but it's like, I need you to love me, and I need you to, I'll stop this pretending that I can somehow deserve what I already have. I couldn't see through all the rage and through all the anger that I couldn't see through all the rage and the anger that I already had these things. And so I'm going to speed it up because we're going to really get into it. God had used my counselor to get to the root, to not focus on the habits that entrapped me, and my healing was exponential. I remember seeing my family and thinking, God, what have you done with my dad? He just seemed so much different, so much lighter, more at peace. This was 7 months later, and a day before I left, we went out to a park in Maryland for lunch, and we talked for hours. And I drummed up the courage to share with him just some things about me that I had done, and things that were so shameful. I was always rejected unexpectedly, so I didn't know what to expect from him. But I was floored by his response. I was met with such grace. He just loved me. And he opened up about his past struggles that I didn't know about. It was weird. We just got to just really jam with each other. And I remember asking him, could I take a picture of him? And he said, sure. And it's one of the most beautiful memories I have. Yeah. So, oh man, it was amazing. So I want to fast forward. 2 to 3 years later, I would become a certified counselor, and I would take on my own caseload of men ranging from ages 18 to 60, each who was broken with a sordid past, full of fear, rage, addictions, resentment, and deep insecurities. And it began to come full circle. I would never have written my life the way it had gone, but God had designed it for a purpose. Genesis 50:20 says, you intended to harm me, but God intended to use it for good to accomplish what is being done to save many lives. I can tell you that it's been crazy, the ride that God has put me on. And it was even crazier when I got back from that, when I resigned and came back from full-time counseling because my dad passed away. And so I went through a period of hating God, hating everything about Christianity, and wanting to become an atheist and an agnostic. And so I went through a very cathartic and non-orthodox healing with that, but it actually developed into a whole brand that I wasn't even looking for. Before we go into VIP, I do want to make sure that I just leave you guys with some things because I know VIP is going to start like around 9 o'clock. And so I want you guys to stay with me because this is going to be for the impasse. I want you to hear this. These are some practical notes. I'm just having to speed things up in the interest of time, but I wanted you guys to hear what brought me to this point. Because after my dad died, that public speaker, that counselor, that mentor, I believe that those things had died with him. And so for a year, I didn't do any of those things, actually for 2 years. And it wasn't until I went through that cathartic process of just dropping a lot of F-bombs to God and all the anger that came out of me, all the black tar and all the hatred I had for him, and believing that this God, I said, okay, God, you're not even existent. That actually ended up being these long walks through the woods where I would take out a camera and just film some of my thoughts. And I began to share those thoughts. I'd never been on social media, on this little platform called LinkedIn. And that's what blew up into a brand. I wasn't looking for it, but it was looking for me. And it was like God searching it back for me, like, this is who you are. You can hide out in corporate as long as you want to, but this is who you are. So as we close, I want to give some practical notes to those who are caught up, entangled in that web and that the fear of rejection produces. Guard against comparing yourself. Write that down. Comparison is the thief of joy. There's a scripture in Corinthians that says when they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they show their ignorance. Don't compare yourself with other people. I grew up very insecure, thinking every other man had some X factor except me because of what I have been through. Now, I don't even look at what folks are doing. I know nothing about marketing and branding. I just go. Guard against compromising your convictions, whatever those may be, whatever your belief is, whatever that conviction is, whatever your conscience is telling you. Guard against compromising that for the favor of other people. You'll never find your lane. 3, guard against the need for control. One thing I had was a very amiable personality. I had the ability to just know how to jam with anybody and know what they wanted, but it was also me controlling them. You didn't hear often people don't like Jahmaal. Everybody liked Jahmaal because that was me controlling them. I didn't give you a reason to not like me. But the same vein, I never found my lane because I always wanted to be in control. Guard against that need. Those are the 3 G's for tonight. 2, visualize victory. Seed plus harvest equals expectation. It's not what you read, but it's what you meditate on. What are you thinking on? If you expect to lose, you will lose. And I know for those of us who have been through just the hard, muddy waters we've been through, sometimes we expect failure. Expect to win. And if you need help expecting to win, there are people available that can buoy you up in that, because we can't do it on our own. Verbalize what is true. Words are spirit. Do you know that your mind has to shut up to hear what your mouth has to say? When that stinking thinking comes and that traitor from within just starts, speaking that death and like, oh, you can't do that, or other people began to speak their insecurities on you, you speak life. You begin to open your mouth and you declare what is true. And like whatever you have written down on that vision board, verbalize that. These are the 3 V's. 3, vacate. Vacate territory that is not fit for you. Empaths like to be everywhere, doing everything for everyone. Do not give everyone access to yourself. That is bad physical, mental, and spiritual hygiene. Remember that. I want you, anybody who's listening to this or people who are going to get the VIP if you want to see this recorded back. Do not give everyone access to yourself. That is bad mental, physical, and spiritual hygiene. It will make you very resentful. 3, be honest and addressing your need to be needed. I'm speaking to empaths, men and women tonight. Men and women. It's mostly men because we have that. We love to be the hero. But also, my sisters who are here tonight, be honest with that need to be needed. And just say, what is that feeding in me? But also, what is it taking out of me? Is it draining me? I remember on 2 of my jobs, I heard 2 things from my mentor. You always answer your phone. And at the time, it didn't sound bad. And then another leader of global security said, I was sitting in a meeting and I heard your name come up 7 times. You must be very responsible for a lot of things around here. If you think about a young man who's insecure, you want to hear that stuff, those things, but I had to examine it going back like, Jahmaal, you have made yourself accessible to everybody where you have no time for you. Bad mental and spiritual hygiene. Don't invest yourself. These are the 3 Ds. Don't invest yourself and your time with what or who drains you. Think to yourself, is it a wing or is it a weight? Don't ingratiate yourself. These are the 3 Ds and Is. Don't invest, don't ingratiate. Don't ingratiate yourself to anybody. What you think and believe about you trumps what they think and what they believe about you. Don't insist, DI, that people are clairvoyant. People, and I know some people may have different beliefs, and I'm not trying to shoot anything down. Most people, 99.10% of people are not clairvoyant. They do not know what you need unless you tell them. And for those of us who are empaths, especially guys, we do not like asking for help. We like to help everybody else, but we don't like to ask for help for ourselves. Don't insist. Ask for help when you need it. Delegate. Take a break. Get some sleep. So as we close out, y'all, I wanted to have the perfect fairy tale life. Due to my own insecurities and hangups and fears and hiccups, I've come to realize that God used the tests and tragedies to shape the very platform of triumph to where I could serve others in similar plights. If any of this hits home with you, I got something for you, and I would love to work with you personally. If anybody tonight, Saley has my LinkedIn. That's where I play the biggest. I'm not that active on Instagram and Facebook, but she has my LinkedIn. There's my Calendly. If you book a Calendly call, even within this week, you don't have to book it for this week, but if you book it tonight, I will give 20% off the month-long intensive and also 20% off the 12 weeks. You have my word on that. That's what I do. I love counseling one-on-one, just to see people get free and stand in their power. But also there'll be other offers going on. But I just want you to know that, you know, if that fits you, if that sounds like you, I got something for you. But if you're the type who loves perfect Canva slides and everything overly processed, I'm not for you. I'm here to work with you one-on-one, not to take your money, but to leave something of high value deposited in you so you can leave a ripple effect. Thanks for having me, guys.
Wow. Thanks so much, Jahmaal. That was so powerful. Everybody, you know, give a clapping emoji, say thanks in the chat if you like really resonated and loved this tonight. So powerful. And I loved at the end when it was like all of a sudden, all the wisdom was like in 25 different ceremony sentences. I was like, I gotta write that every single one of these down. So maybe we can type it up and send it as a gift to everybody who attended tonight. You know, at the end, guys, everybody who's attending these sessions, I'm going to send like a recap of gifts that everybody has kind of given. So you'll have access to all the creators discounts or, you know, packages that we've set up, because we really, really wanted to make this a summit, something super accessible for men. So thank you so much for coming. And now we're going to go into the VIP section where you can pick Jahmaal's brain even more. He can put more of the wisdom on us. And like he said, if you want, you know, to do that, please make sure to purchase VIP. Other than that, thank you guys so much. I'll see you tomorrow night, Friday night with Joe, talking about masculine and feminine energy. So yeah, guys, thank you so much. All right, guys, welcome back to VIP. We're here with Jahmaal answering some amazing questions. I'm going to read them out. Jamaal's going to answer them. And yeah, so anybody who has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And me and Jahmaal were just talking before this about control and how he's doing a post soon about the narcissist from within, which I think is really interesting. And we can talk about that until people drop their questions in here. So can you actually explain to us a little bit about what that means?
You'll see, obviously, Elise, you know, we've been following each other's content. Like I've been coming in hard on mental health and empaths and practicing boundaries, because that's so huge, not just for our own health and wellness, but for our productivity. Many of us here are professionals, you know, so we need to be at maximum optimal head and heart space to operate correctly. And narcissists tend to drain that energy, but we also have to address what is it that draws a narcissist to me? And who is that traitor within, the narcissist within, that needs to be needed, that wants to manipulate and wants to be seen as the go-to person, the shoulder to lean on, you know, the mountain to climb, the advisor. That narcissist oftentimes does themselves more damage than good. And it's easier from a social standpoint to point the finger at the narcissist without, because everyone sees that jerk or that control freak or that person that who has that toxic environment, toxic community, toxic way of dealing with folks. But we have to look within and say, what is this feeding in me that they've actually targeted me? Because they can only take the power that you give to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree that all of us have something to look at within ourselves that is toxic. I think for me, I would really like to ask you as a question, just because you're a counselor and you probably see this a lot more. Do you feel like, because of social media and all the definitions that are out there, that we throw around the word narcissist quite loosely? Because narcissistic personality disorder is like a legit disorder. And from what I've read, only 3.5% of people actually have that. But I feel like everybody's like, oh, they were a narcissist or he's a narcissist. And I think it plays into exactly what you're saying. Like, it's easy to point fingers, but then 3 of them are pointing back at us, right? And I think it's
Exactly.
just from my point of view, and I really want to get your perspective on this, is I feel like it's just a lot of unhealed people blaming other unhealed people.
That's what it is. And it's like a never ending cycle. And then the very person that's unhealed, they actually end up going out and perpetrating those same things on other people and starting their own toxic communities or their own codependent relationships and draining others. So, and you see it in counseling a lot. And when you put your finger on it, like, you know, when you begin to, I call it reading mail, the client is like, I'm not really here for that. But it's like, well, the pattern of your life and the tendencies and the data that I'm collecting is actually showing that. So let's tackle that. If you really want to heal and you really want to get into it, let's go there.
They don't usually, right?
Not
Like,
often, no. It's so much easier to blame shift. And like you, when you came in during the session with everybody, it's like, that's where the healing happens when we begin to own our own human responsibility.
yes. Oh my God. And that's what I tell clients is the most painful part of healing. Like, healing is hard, not because it's like you go to a 14-hour work shift and you're tired and exhausted. It's hard because you have to look at yourself and the beliefs that you have, the painful moments in your life that you have, and you have to admit, I caused some of this shit. Like,
Yep.
I am my own worst enemy, and now I have to change. Like, you have to admit, like, hey, I was the demon for that part of my life, and I hurt some people even when I thought I was right. Right. And that's the hard part, is just actually facing your change. So does anybody have questions that they want to ask? And okay, so we've got some in the chat. New to dealing with my mental health, but how do you get past not feeling like a victim when all of past traumas are just now being allowed to come up in the surface? I've been struggling a lot with this lately. That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, and there is whoever asked that question, that's a wonderful question. There's space for that. And please, I would encourage you to get away from any counseling, any therapist, any coach that is not giving you that space to process that part. Just like if we've ever lost a parent or anyone close to you, or even a pet, there's stages of grief. There's 7 different stages. So there's going to be 7 or 8 stages of healing. And part of the stage is that victim where it's like, this is what was perpetrated. Let me sit with this. And even those hard things that can sometimes, you know, when we're in that victim spot, we feel in pain and we want to numb that pain. You're not going to process your pain and navigate it perfectly. You may even have some failures. You may even have some relapses, but that is a part of the process. And I don't want you to hear like the greasy grace and it's like, oh, just go ahead and throw yourself into whatever it is. But that's a stage. And have people that can live in that season with you and are willing to swim through those deep and very muddy waters. And a lot of times swimming through those waters is really just being present. It's not even giving advice because that advice is not going to land. Does that make sense? I hope that does to whoever asked.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was so good, and we're gonna see if they feel the same. But I love that you said, you know, there is space for that, because once again, if you skip over that, you're trying the microwave route, right? Like, I don't want to look at any of the pain. I just want to feel better. So, you know, no one should rush your process. There's a difference between acknowledging the pain and making space for the pain and then living in the pain and making the pain your story. There's a totally different vibe, right? If you are working through the pain, you're just acknowledging it now, give it space. And you'll know when you create distance with that, because you use it to create tools to overcome, not as a way to shield yourself from the rest of the pain in the world.
That's
right?
it.
So love it. He totally resonated. Okay. That was a great question. I love that you asked that. Okay, here's the next one. I'm just figuring out if I fall into this area of trying to please everybody. It's crazy to understand how this is damaging and not so healthy. Your perspective is eye-opening. Okay, I guess that wasn't a question, but your perspective on that was really eye-opening. Do you want to dive into that just a little bit more, just to elaborate?
Yeah, it was weird. And I'm going to say this and be very transparent. Like even with the content, because my main place of playing is LinkedIn, where I'm releasing there, I'm having to say, Jahmaal, be real, keep it 100, but tone it down. Most folks are going to be in denial. I can tell you I would say 60% of the people that come into my comment sections are in denial about where they are, because some of them I know personally, and I'm like, you don't exhibit the habits of somebody that's really free from this, but thanks for sharing. I mean, hey, I'm not in any engagement pod, so I appreciate any engagement on my activity anyway, but we're going to start off in denial about where we are. And like, are we really that much of a control freak? And do we have those insecurities and that brokenness and that woundedness within us where we have to please people and we're not pleased with who we are. And we need that affirmation. So I would just encourage whoever said that, if this is just coming to light with you, one, I'd love to work with you. And if not, take the time to just sit with those things and meditate of like, what are the habits? Always look for a pattern. I love, as y'all know, you always see me in nature. So I love being in the woods and I love watching spiders weave their way. If they weave in a certain pattern and they continue that pattern, look for the continued patterns in your life. And those patterns will reveal like whether you're pleasing people or whether you're taking care of yourself so that you actually can interact with people in a manner that's redemptive.
That's so good. So good. Bill wants to know, he says, wins lift us up, losses bring us down. What were the wins you experienced that kept you up? That's a great question.
Ooh, nice. Let's get into it. I would say when I became a certified counselor, it gave me a chance. Like before that, I worked in quality control on a website. So for me, just the way I'm designed, like if that's what you do, hey man, you do the dang thing, but that just wasn't my gifting. I'm meant to just interact with people. I'm meant to be a healer. I'm meant to be on the front lines. And I really got to see that time behind the scenes. It was a design to get me to the place where I would do it with the right motives. So seeing someone go from darkness to light, seeing someone like, it's the emotional currency, because depending on like where you counsel, where you coach, and especially when I first started out, it was a social work aspect. It wasn't a whole lot of currency, but like when I see someone come in full of shame, full of darkness, and many of them were drug addicts and they had all different types of addictions, because when you're insecure, when you're a people pleaser, a procrastinator, perfectionist, you have to numb that pain somehow. And it's usually going to be some addictive habit. And so when I saw people getting free and like walking through the process, and it's like, I knew for me, I played a small part. To me, they said I played a big part. I was like, no, I'm playing a small part. You're doing the work. That was like a win for me, because it's like, I felt like after so many losses in my own life, it's not like, oh, this makes me feel good about me, but it's amazing that this is now being used as an agent of healing. Like I can process with them and minister grace to them. And when I say minister, I don't mean to be churchy. I mean, not pretend I'm shocked by anything they told me. Like if I showed you the paperwork for my case, though, you'd just be like, oh my gosh. But with all the dark alleys I've been down, it helped me to know how to touch something in each different client, because each one was different. So that was a win for me, because none of my clients were the same. And it's just like, if you give the same package to 12 to 14 to 20 different people, it's not going to land the same way. And so learning how to deal with different people in their different walks of life, different age groups, different ethnicities, different learning styles, that was a huge win. And I'd say one of the biggest wins in my life is my relationship with my dad, the healing that occurred there. Before he passed away, my worst enemy became my best friend. And I'll never forget that. That's been one of the biggest wins that keeps wind in my sails.
That is so beautiful, Jahmaal. And we actually dove, for anybody who's listening who wants to dive more into Jahmaal's like personal story, we did a podcast together, and it's on my podcast, and I can definitely link it here. But he dives deep into the relationship with his father, and the transformation that he experienced was so beautiful. So just thought I would put that out there.
Saley says Matt's been raising his hand. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the chat.
No, yep, and I messaged her. So Anna Maria had said, I'm doing CBT, BDT at the moment, but I feel like we're jumping over those muddy waters. Would you suggest adding a more trauma healing focused approach and going there?
I would, before I make suggestions, I am very keen to not speak of a matter there of what I don't know. So I would probably, Anna Marie, you know where to find me, DM me so I can just get a little bit more insight as to what all that is for. And you don't have to share but so much. But I don't want to just advise that you add before having more context. I do appreciate your question, but I want to approach that carefully, because I'm very strict about those things. We know especially in the place of social media, people throw advice out like it's nothing, and they don't care or consider the person. Since I care about you as a person, so I want to be very careful with that. And we can broach that a little later off this platform, but that's such a good question. And I really appreciate your honesty.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, Jahmaal. And I think just for anyone who's looking to get into this, look for someone, like look less into the types of modalities, because I feel like people always come to me like, do you do CBT or do you do this? Because they've read on social media about all these different healing things. And I'm certified in a ton of them. And I don't use any specific one because what you need is going to be different. So I think first and foremost, look for a counselor or a therapist or coach who you resonate with, who you feel can have a good relationship with, first and foremost, because the relationship is going to create the foundation for the healing more than the methodology. And, I work with trauma a lot, and in trauma therapy, there's a statistic that talks about CBT. And it, like, CBT has this big thing in the healing world, but statistically, it's not actually as beneficial as people have put it out. And so, like, that's why we need to really do research on like modalities and things like that, because there's, like Jahmaal said, there's a lot of stuff on social media that people just play up. And so, I mean, I would say look at who you have a connection with, who you trust, because I mean, I don't know, Jahmaal, maybe you'll say something different. I think it's less about all of the modalities, and look at someone who you trust, who's got the tools that you feel can really help you.
At least we're on one accord. I mean, all of us have gone through school, gone through the certifications, we have our paperwork, but we know before anyone does counseling, you do what? Practicum. You practice for 50 or plus hours, sometimes 100 hours, because you don't really know what to do. And because in the digital age we live in, Anna Marie and anyone under the sound of my voice, you have a lot of people who don't even have the hours. They just have the certification. They don't even know what to do with people because they don't understand people. I would say someone who has tried and tested and cares about people, because they can get to the heart of the matter, that gets to the mind of the matter, that actually changes the will of the matter. I don't come here purporting to have 6,000 degrees on my wall, but I know what I'm doing. Look at my recommendation section. I'm good at what I do. So we are definitely on one accord.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Dude, the first time I talked to Dylan too, I was like, oh, are you certified in trauma therapy or anything like that? And he's like, no, I've just been through a lot of trauma. And I'm like, amen. Amen. Sometimes, I mean, it's good to know, like, in a book smart way, but exactly like you said, like, if you don't have the actionable, hours, or you don't understand, like, it's hard to relate. So find someone who you can relate to, and that's going to be really good. So Dylan actually asked, why do you do what you do now? And how do you think that will transform throughout the rest of your life?
Good question, Dylan. I do what I do now because, I mean, if you think, like, time went by so fast when I was on and when Elise was jumping in, that was years. I don't come with fancy canvas slides like, oh man, it was just 3 months went by and all of a sudden I was healed and just walked through a field doing cartwheels. That was years of being in that bondage of wanting to just be accepted and loved and wanted, and wanting someone to take an interest in me, and turning my nose up at the things that actually, and people who did take an interest in me, because I began to rate people. I didn't even talk about that during our talk. We rate people and we put things on a rating system and we miss out on so many opportunities. I do what I do because I don't want to see people waste the time that I did. In the face, just because I have daddy's genes, I may look really young, but I'm almost 40. And so I don't want to see people waste that time in that bondage. Now I am a Christian, but I have counselees and clients who aren't Christians. I have counselees who are Christians. And so I can deal with whoever you put in front of me, but I do what I do to see people get free. Because I can tell you one thing: perfectionism, people pleasing, procrastination, it'll just cause you to wait to know everything until you do anything. And then you wake up and you're 65, 75, and you're like, where did the time go? I never walked out what I was called and created for. It's just like, that's my hunger pain. It's like, man, if that's you, it's time to get free. Let's get into it. Hope that answers your question.
Oh my God, I just had to give a moment of silence because that was so good. And it was just like last night when we talked about the Dr. John Maxwell quote, dying without fulfilling your potential is like dying while the music is still playing inside of you, dying with the music still inside of you. And that's exactly what I said. And I think a lot of us who go after careers and, scratching your own itch, it is to help others above all, and to save time and to save pain. Cause that's exactly why I said I do what I do last night too. And, I think that really stems from, like a childhood pain that, like, it's so interesting. Sorry, I'm going to bring this up because nobody else has a question yet. When you said,
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Matt didn't have a question, who was raising his hand. He did. I just
He's not here.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he didn't have a question. So when you said earlier, I was born to like be a creator and a healer. I listened to a podcast a long time ago that talked about people who go through trauma or who are people pleasers tend to become the healers and the healthcare workers and the saviors, like as their career path. So it's kind of interesting to think, is this what I was born to do, or is this just what I was crafted to do because of that internal need to help people, to heal people? I mean, either way, it is what it is, but it's just a very interesting concept to think about.
It's very interesting. But the funny thing is if you think about, let's say faith-based, non-faith-based, from a faith-based standpoint, it would be said that, Satan or the enemy, whatever like that, has worked tirelessly to retard your development. Non-faith-based, I'm gonna try to speak to everybody. The world, society, the universe, whatever like that, has worked to retard your development. And so even in that retardation, like when I shared that scripture from Genesis 50:20, it's like you meant it for evil, but God is able to use it to save many alive. It's like those evils that were perpetrated on us, that sunk us down in the canyon, became the very mountaintop that we stand on to lift others up. And it's like, I wouldn't have written my story the way it is, but it's like, look at what's happening. And it's like, this is the mantle I've been given, and this is also the post I've been given to man. And if I died tonight, I'm like, man, thank God, that's pretty cool.
So awesome. We have another question here. Where is that inflection point between wanting to help and heal and being a rescuer pleaser? The former is noble, but the latter is what I'm dealing with in a toxic relationship currently. How do you move that inflection point in the right way?
That's an awesome question. And that is where you have to ask yourself, well, we didn't talk about it tonight, but we're gonna talk about it now. Take inventory, and even physically. And I know, I think later in the week, some of the coaches talk about this. Take inventory of your energy. Is this a wing? I pointed out earlier, or is it a weight? Does this weigh you down, or does it give life to you? Does this person in this relationship, is it weighty? Is it burdensome? Or does it buoy you up? And when you're entering into this, are you entering into it with the motive that I'm doing something for this, so certainly I have to get back what I've given out? And you constantly are setting yourself up for disappointment. So look for those, again, spider web, look for that web, look for those patterns. And if the pattern is more of a weight than it is a wing, and also feeding something in you where it's just kind of this cyclical dance, that's when you need to begin to separate yourself. First, deal with that traitor within that's saying, stay in this because you're actually healing this person. And then deal with the traitor or the person without. There's a redemptive way to do that, to slowly separate yourself from that which is unhealthy for you. Because if you're not healthy yourself, you can't heal others. And then it's not good for that person. It's actually, the funny thing about someone who's draining you is that if you keep rescuing them, you'll have to keep doing it again. It's almost like a parent that doesn't discipline their child. They're not helping that child by not disciplining them and giving them home training. And a lot of those kids, as we know, end up in jail.
Oh my God, I love that you just said that just now, Jahmaal, because the difference between healing and helping versus like rescuing someone is like, people don't need to be rescued. Healing and helping people is just creating space for them to live their journey and being present, right? If you're trying to rescue and save someone, you can sometimes just prolong their pain. Like, and even my therapist gave me a good wake up call the other day. She's like, Elise, even if they did what you said they were going to do because you said it, how would that be aiding them? Right? It wouldn't, because they would just be trying to appease you. Right? Even someone who's struggling with drugs or alcohol, and you know that they need to stop, you can take the alcohol away, you can try to like get them out of jail and do all this for them. But if they don't decide to make that change themselves, it doesn't matter what you do. You're not rescuing them. You're prolonging their pain. And you're actually saying, I don't believe you're capable of doing this by yourself, so I'm going to try to do it for you. And that feels very hurtful to us because we don't want people in our lives to suffer. But you have to, at some point, let people live their journey the way it's meant to live out if they do not want to change in that moment. And then helping them, healing them, is just creating space for them to heal when they say they're ready. Right? That's how I see it.
That is so deep. And I want to make it a little simple and just add to it if I can, that when you do that and when you have that rescue mentality, I liken it to getting in the way of a Mack truck. You will get hit and you will get run over, and your recovery will be even longer just because you stood in the way thinking you were doing something good. And I want to actually use another proverb that says, there's a way that seems right to a man, but it ends in death. Begin with the end in mind. I wrote a newsletter with that today. Begin with the end in mind. Like, where's the end of this? It's only so much foresight we as human beings have, but think about the end of it and think, okay, is this me getting in the car, riding with this person to help them along the way? Or is this me rescuing and standing in front of a Mack truck to only get ran over?
So good. I love where this conversation is going. And another question leading into that, how do you know if the other person is weighing you down due to something you're doing? If you could fix something about yourself, then the other person will respond differently. Not sure if this makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. And I want to say something that may not be popular. So buckle your seatbelts. You are not responsible for their response. And a lot of times, those of us that are empaths, those of us that are people pleasers, those of us that want to heal the world, we feel so responsible for the way that person's going to respond. Should we pull back, and should we actually do something to take care of ourselves? You are not responsible. Be freed of that. Now, granted, it may take coaching, it may take counseling, it may take therapy to actually work through what that looks like practically. But in the interest of time, I'm just trying to answer your question. When we take on that responsibility, we keep ourselves in a cycle for years. And we never actually have those hard conversations and those conversations that need to happen because we're in fear. Again, fear of rejection of that person's response. And we taking the responsibility. You're responsible for how you come across. If I come across and I just say, oh, F you, I'm responsible for that. That's not my way. But I'm not responsible if I'm tactfully approaching a person to establish a boundary of how they respond. They are.
Absolutely, Jahmaal. And I heard it from a relationship coach one time too, that imagine your relationship's like a circle and both of you are standing in the circle. But when you try to change yourself because of how you think they're going to think of you, and you try to do everything to make sure they're happy, you push them out of the circle and you try to take 100% of the responsibility for the relationship when you're only supposed to have 50%, right? You don't allow them to level up. You don't allow them to rise to the occasion or to accept you for who you are. And then what happens is you, like you said, you think you're doing a good thing, but you're doing a disservice to both people because you're not allowing them to enter into the relationship. You're becoming resentful because they're not adding to the relationship, but then you're also doing a disservice to yourself because you're taking on more responsibility and not allowing that, right? So it's a total unequal in exchange, and that in itself is manipulative, right? Because you're trying to make things perfect. And that's when we have to look, oh my God, this is my shadow. I am technically manipulating this person, trying to make it perfect, trying to make everything work. But I'm not allowing them to see me because I'm afraid. That fear is there. And then you dive in, where did I learn that it wasn't acceptable for me to just be loved as me? And that's where the work starts. That's the place that nobody wants to go to. They just want to say, oh, that person doesn't want to give, even though you took up all the circle. Then you leave, go repeat it with a ton of other people. And you wonder, why am I always finding every single woman is a narcissist, right? But it's not that. The common denominator is you, right? We have to look at what the common denominator is. And that's the worst part. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No, that was a wonderful tangent. And I hope that that's a mic drop moment that we can actually spread and actually share with other people. When you talked about shadow, it made me think of a lyric from a Lauryn Hill song. It says, focus on the shadow with my back turned to the light, too intelligent to see it's me in the way. When I heard that, I was just like, I love lyrics. Obviously I love spoken word and poetry. It's just like when we're in the way, we get in the way of that person's healing, but we also get in the way of our own wholeness. Stop blocking.
That's so around beautiful. It's like a dam, right? You only want to let a little bit of water through, but eventually you got to let it flow to have like an even stream, right? I don't know if that comparison is good or not, but we have another question here. And guys, so we're nearing the end of VIP time. So any last minute questions that you have, please put them in the chat, or else we're going to answer this one from David. I feel responsible for some reason for everything around me. It seems I only feel responsible for the bad around me and not the good things happening around me. So technically not a question, but I want to expand on that.
Okay. And this, I can just tell you from someone who has been there and who has owned all the bad. Elise knows I work for anti-human trafficking. So outside of counseling and coaching and podcasting and public speaking, I'm a global leader, anti-human trafficking nonprofit. That's not easy work. People go away from it. We go into it. And anytime it's organized chaos. Anytime something goes wrong, I would find myself owning it. And when things went right, I would just skip right over it. And I couldn't celebrate the wins. And I would just encourage you, give yourself that freedom. And you may need accountability from your family, if you're married, your wife, your friends, to actually celebrate every little win, every tiny, teeny little win you have until it becomes a habit. So that way you can take responsibility for the good things that happen. It's going to be an act of the will. It's going to be like, I call it dry obedience, long obedience in the same direction, where it's like, I don't even feel like doing this. I don't see the benefit of doing this, but I'm going to start. Going into the gym, I can guarantee you one thing. Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, Arnold Schwarzenegger, they didn't look like that overnight. They had to continually put in the reps. So David, put in those reps, man, you will see the benefit.
I love that you brought that up too, Jahmaal, because and you're always going to have people who don't like your decisions and don't like where you're going, especially when you start changing in the healing journey. They're going to be like, oh, you're changing. And you're like, yo, that's the whole point. Like, I don't like my life where it's at. I want to leave it behind. But some people are going to be uncomfortable with that, because as you change, you reflect a mirror back on them on their own shadow. People do not like that. So just remember that if anybody has a problem with you changing and you start to fear, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? It's literally part of the journey, because you start to show people what they're not doing, and they feel bad for that. So they're going to try to get you to stop because it makes them feel better. So just like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the gym every day, someone said, oh, I would never want to look like you. And he's like, don't worry, you never will. Right?
I love
Don't worry,
it.
you never will, because you're not willing to put in the work. That, he said, I'm always going to go because someone is always trying to steal first place from me. And when you are doing the healing work, someone is going to try to steal that from you. I mean, that sounds like super evil or super deceptive. Like, no one's really thinking about you, but you have to remember that there are going to be people who are upset at your truth, at where you're headed, at where you're going. And to just remember that has nothing to do with you. It's just because you're reflecting back on them their own shadow.
That went into me like arrows. I'm on fire right now. I pray I carry that fire, because I got one more work day and some counseling to do. So
oh God,
I need that fire.
Tomorrow, Friday fire.
Amen.
Wow, Jahmaal, this has been so beautiful, so enlightening. I loved your little quips, because they're things that you can like think about, during the day when you need a boost, when you need to get back on track. So I love it. He's going to send me the typed version, guys. And we're going to be able to send that out to everybody as like an extra thing. And because you guys are in VIP, I haven't uploaded the videos yet, but all these full videos are going to be uploaded into Kajabi. You just have to log in through the website, along with any attachments or any PDFs that we include. So I'll include that in the Kajabi as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And other than that, I hope you have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
God bless you all. Grace and peace. Appreciate everybody for coming.